All right, we've talked about my pet peeves and formatting. We've looked at messaging. We've hopefully honed that in, and we know what we're going to talk about. How do we come up with a concept for your radio commercial that best meets that particular message? So in this particular video, we're going to look at tips 16 through 25. We're still not writing yet. We're just concepting, and this gives us the opportunity to try and think about what we're going to write and what that radio commercial is actually going to turn into. I kept out number 9. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Tip number 16 is throw a curve. Throw a curve. Where's my baseball? There's my baseball. I bring the baseball in because when you think about great pitchers, they've got in their arsenal 2 or 3 or 4 really great pitches, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to trick the batter, but they're trying to throw something at them that they're not expecting. And the same thing is true for a radio commercial. You want to be able to give them a concept and communicate that to them in such a way that it's not what they're expecting, because that's what's going to get their attention. And you're focusing it on that one thing that you've developed in your message. Okay? So that's tip number 16, throw them a curveball. What's the most unusual, imaginative way that you can come up with a concept that is based on this one thing that you're going to communicate, this one message, this one focus? Tip number 17 is trash the obvious. Let me give you an example. The other day I had to write a commercial, and it was for a January radio commercial, and it was about the new year. Well, there's kind of some things that we all, they're stock things for New Year's. New Year's resolutions, New Year's parties, party favors, and I kind of had to throw all those out, because I knew that if I focused on that and didn't come up with something original, it wouldn't be interesting to the radio listener. So I came up with a concept that was about a guy who was living in the past, and he was going to do something new in the new year. So it was a little bit more original. So tip number 17 is trash the obvious. The first things that kind of come into your mind, they've probably been done a million times. They're old hat. So jettison those from your mind and continue to try and come up with something that's more original. And sometimes that takes time, and you get stuck. And tip number 18 kind of addresses that problem, and that is take a long walk. For me, many times I'll be sitting at the computer, or I've got my notebook, and I'm just stuck. I can't think of an idea. And what I need to do is I need to break from the environment. And for me, that's taking a long walk. I'll take my notepad with me or my phone so I can do a voice memo if I want. Maybe it's going to a coffee shop for you, something where you can break the environment. But for me, it's taking a long walk, and make sure you bring something to write with, because you'll come up with an idea, you'll have a brainstorm, and you want to make sure that you write it down. Tip number 19 is let's get physical. Now, of course, we know that radio is theater of the mind. But anytime I'm writing a radio commercial, sometimes I have to stop myself and remind myself of this tip. Trying to come up with some type of a physical action or something that's happening physical that's relating to the focus of this particular radio commercial. And this is true, I think, with film and theater and a lot of things. Anytime you can show things happening, and obviously in radio it's in the theater of the mind, it makes it that much more interesting. Years ago I had to do some consulting on some radio drama, and it was just page after page after page of drama with nothing happening, and it was boring. Same is true with radio commercials. Come up with something physical that you can communicate. Radio, theater of the mind. Tip number 20 is noodle on it, and this is a simple tip. If you've got a week or so before the deadline and the radio commercial is due, noodle on it. Think about it a couple of days. Just put it in your subconscious, in the back of your mind, and just let it ruminate. And sometimes you don't always have that much time, but you do want to give yourself the time, if you can, to be able to noodle on it. And another tip is always have something available to write the idea down. At night, I've got one of these little pens by my bedside, and it lights up. Well, not very well. Well, apparently. There we go. It lights up, so in the middle of the night, I'll write the idea down, because if I don't, and I've told myself I'll remember it in the morning, and I don't, I do indeed write it down in the middle of the night on a notepad or a 3x5 card, because I've written many radio commercials in the middle of the night. Tip number 21, crazy characters. Write crazy characters. The most outlandish characters are the most interesting characters. When we think of sitcoms and we think of, George or any of the characters from Seinfeld, but specifically like Kramer or any of the Simpson characters or South Park characters, anytime you can come up with a crazy character, an exaggerated character, it makes your concept that much more interesting and memorable. So try to do that when you're looking at that one thing. I'm going to go back to this messaging tip. Focus on one thing. Tip number 22 is in the moment. Again, we're talking about one thing. Instead of telling a broad story, what's the moment that you can use that relates to this one thing that you're trying to communicate in your message? Maybe it's the day or the moment you got fired, the day you met your wife for the first time, the day you, fill in the blank. Anytime you can take a moment and relate it to a radio commercial rather than a broad story, it makes it that much more interesting. So look for unusual, significant, or funny moments that have happened to you in your life. Your life, that brings up tip number 23. Use your stories. If you can, sometimes somebody else's story is interesting, but if it's a story that's happened to you, it's that much more interesting than a story that's happened to somebody else. I don't know why, but it makes telling the story that much more mesmerizing, so to speak. It's going to capture people's attention more. If you listen to a speaker speak and they're rambling on about something and all of a sudden they start talking about something that happened to them, you'll notice the audience, everybody's attention is drawn back to the speaker. And the same is true with radio commercials. So talk about things that happened to you, not necessarily something that happened to somebody else. Tip number 24 is touch a nerve. A lot of times those moments, things that have happened to you in the moment, they're related to some kind of an emotion, envy, jealousy, greed, love, whatever it may be. You want to try and touch a nerve in your radio commercial, especially when you're trying to focus on a problem and a solution. Anytime you can use an emotion to communicate that message, it's going to make the radio commercial that much stronger, rather than just selling points. Tip number 25, this is kind of a script writing, we haven't gotten there yet, but it's kind of a script writing tip. Bookend it. Many times, I'm like you. I get faced with a deadline. I got to write. I got to start on something. I've got an idea. I've got the concept. The message is going well, and I'm stuck at the end. What do I do? How do I end this? What I'll do is I'll look back at the beginning. Is there a sound effect? Is there a character's entrance? Is there something that the character said that I can bring back and bookend in the radio commercial? And that's happened many times for me. And it's just a tip for creating the concept, coming up with an end to the concept, bookend it. Repeat a sound, repeat a character, or something like that. So those are my concepting tips. We've got messaging, we've got concepting. Next, we're going to look at script writing. Let me give you some tips on how to write a good radio script, okay?